Welcome to Candid Catholic Convos, a program brought to you by the Catholic Diocese of Harrisburg. Our mission is to humanize the Church and help you to grow in your faith, love, and understanding. I'm your host, Rachel Trochet, a cradle Catholic who's only human and struggled with faith on more than one occasion. Each week, you'll hear engaging, down-to-earth interviews and actionable strategies you can implement into your life with ease to help you grow closer to God. If you're ready to open your heart and step fully into the person God created you to be, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Hey, it's Rachel. Just wanted to let you know that we are taking a short summer breather this August. So today's episode is a favorite from our archives, but don't hit skip just yet, because starting in September, we're rolling out a brand new format designed just for you. Whether you're deep in your faith, just coming back, or still searching, we're talking fresh voices, powerful stories, saint spotlights, and practical conversations that meet you wherever you are on your journey. So while we revisit some meaningful past episodes this month, know that something exciting, thoughtful, and mission-driven is just around the corner. Be sure to follow or subscribe, and if you love the show, share it with someone who could use a little hope in their feed. Today's Encore episode is with Christina Ring, a nurse practitioner with Hospice of Central PA, as we talk about the difference between palliative care and hospice care, how we can compassionately care for our loved ones in line with church teachings, and some things we can do to prepare ourselves for the inevitable. Christina, welcome to Candid Catholic Convos. Thanks so much for joining me today to talk about this topic that I feel like doesn't get enough attention in the world today.
I am so grateful to be here. Thanks, Rachel.
So I know about you because we have met each other before, but can you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Christina Ring. I'm a nurse practitioner with Hospice of Central PA. I've been a nurse for 19 years, a nurse practitioner for 11 years. Most of my nursing and nurse practitioner career was at UPMC. And then for the last 3 years, I've worked as a palliative care nurse practitioner for Hospice of Central PA. I have 3 kiddos at home, ages 6, 8, and 10. I've been married for 12 years, and I'm a parishioner of St. Anne's Byzantine Catholic Church.
Talk to me a little bit about, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, palliative care?
Mm-hmm. Nope, you got it.
What kind of led you to this type of medicine?
It's interesting. So if I truly look back over my whole nursing career, I feel like end-of-life medicine was kind of finding me all along. It was really neat. So even as a floor nurse back at the hospital, end-of-life patients were kind of always falling into my schedule. And I started to really become comfortable talking to patients and their families about end-of-life issues and kind of taking them from a place of fear and anxiety to kind of a place of peace about what was inevitably going to happen. And then my career kind of moved and grooved, and I ended up in long-term care. And there I really took care of a lot of patients nearing the end of life. And I was finding that colleagues and peers were starting to ask me to be the one to initiate a goals of care conversation or talk about the severity of their illness or kind of plant some seeds so that we could kind of dance into the conversations that we needed to dance into. And those conversations just came so naturally and so easily to me. And it seemed like patients and families were always receptive just because of kind of it didn't have to be as scary as everybody thought it was. So the way we navigated it together just, I don't know, it just became like second nature. And then lo and behold, about 3 years ago, a friend and a colleague told me about a palliative care position that was open at Hospice of Central PA. And I really wasn't sure I was interested in changing my job at that point. I was working really close to home. I was very, familiar with what I was doing, had a great team, worked with great people. And I thought, do I really want to upset this right now? But I did. I interviewed and was offered the position and then really had a choice to make. And I could not make the decision. I drove myself crazy. I drove everyone around me crazy. And I was truly, every night I would pray, okay, what should I do? What should I do? What should I do? And I couldn't come up with an answer until one night I went to bed and I asked, where do you need me? True story. And I woke up the very next morning and I knew I had to take the job.
That's
That's how I
powerful.
got there.
Oh, I love that. I love that. And I love that it's God was kind of laying out this path for you, and it was
All
just
along.
all along. And then in hindsight, you're like, oh, I see it now.
Absolutely.
That's so powerful.
Absolutely.
Talk to me a little bit about what palliative care is. Is it different from hospice? Is it the same thing? Are they kind of like under the same umbrella?
Palliative care is different than hospice. And I think that they often get kind of lumped together. So I'm kind of glad to help explain this a little bit better. So under palliative care, our job is to really focus on managing the symptom burden that patients have. And what's neat about palliative care is those patients don't have to stop doing anything they're doing. They can continue to see their family doctors, their specialists. They can go to the hospital. They can get chemotherapy, blood transfusions. Nothing in their life has to change. Palliative care is just another layer of support on top of that. And people often say, like, how do I know who is a palliative care patient? Who's appropriate? It could be people that might be starting to frequent the hospital or the emergency department a little more frequently, patients who might be undergoing some sort of treatment, but they're finding that the treatment is just not as helpful as it once was, or patients that are really burdened by symptoms related to whatever chronic disease they have or life-limiting illness they're kind of dealing with. Hospice, on the other hand, is for patients who have a life-limiting illness and who we would anticipate their life expectancy to be 6 months or less. And there, our goal is purely comfort-based care for the patients and their families. And we offer a really robust team of support to kind of help manage all the things that come up in those last 6 months of life.
That's fascinating. I never really knew that there was that much of a difference. Like, to me, it was all, oh, you're stuck in a bed somewhere. You know what I mean? It's just such a misconception to know that it's just a more of a level of support than it is you're confined to.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You are not limited by anything on palliative. Travel, go where you want, do what you want to do. There's nothing that limits you. But it's nice to sometimes, I've found that specialists and stuff, sometimes everybody kind of takes care of a piece of that patient's pie. And I think palliative care does a really good job at stepping back to look at the whole patient and kind of help determine what's important to them. And one of the things that we really do well is really explore the patient's goals of care. And sometimes that conversation is beginning in palliative care. And I think it's important because that takes a lot of work. And that's not a conversation that's quick. And I think it's unrealistic to expect specialists and primary care providers to have these conversations because it's just not feasible with the schedule that they have. But we have a lot more time to really help patients figure out what is most important to them. I think that we can kind of help them figure out where they are on their journey. And I think once we do that, they're able to make better decisions based on that information. So that goals of care piece, I think, is one of the most important things we do to help patients under palliative care.
That is so important because what's that saying? Knowledge is power.
Absolutely.
You can easily make better decisions when you have the information that you need to make the decision. I think that's so important.
We take care of, physical symptoms. It could be pain, shortness of breath, nausea, anxiety, fatigue, things like that. But there's a huge emotional component to patients when they have a chronic illness or a life-limiting disease. And sometimes it's just taking the time to let patients tell their story. Sometimes they want to tell you what they did and they want to tell you about their kids and, things like that. And I think giving them a chance to kind of reminisce and reflect on their life is really important for them. And giving them the support that this is their decision. These are their decisions. And palliative care is not there to necessarily steer them one place or another, but rather just support whatever decision they feel in their heart that they need to make for themselves. And we also have a whole spiritual component to this, because whether a patient is spiritual or not, oftentimes spiritual issues kind of bubble up toward the end of life. And patients are more than welcome to reach out to a spiritual person from their congregation. But we also have our own team of chaplains and social workers that are phenomenal, truly phenomenal at helping patients navigate some of those issues that pop up toward the end of life, and even help walk through kind of the dying process with patients and families. So that's the beauty of palliative, is it's such just a holistic care for patients.
It really is. It sounds, gosh, I wish my PCP could do all of that in a lot of ways, but you're right. They don't have the capacity,
right,
because their schedules are so busy, and it's a shame that it gets to a point where you're needing that more constant care. Is that fair to say? But it's nice to know that it's there, that the support is available to kind of get you through this stage.
And our team has the luxury of being able to visit patients in their homes, which is really nice. And we work closely with the UPMC teams and the Hershey teams in the area, the Penn State team in the area. But being able to truly meet people where they live is so valuable. You see what they see on a daily basis. You see what their family is like. You see where they're sleeping, what home is like, how they're maneuvering. And it really allows you to see patients on such a deeper level than in a office setting where you're kind of limited in time and things are a little bit more sterile. So it's really a gift to be able to go see people in their own element.
Yeah, it's very much very in-depth if you think about it. Like you just, I like that. I like that a lot. Just like I was confused about, what palliative care and hospice is, in recent years, I've noticed that it's not just me who has this understanding of what palliative care is. And some national laws include euthanasia or assisted suicide, which I feel is often overlooked when we talk about the pro-life movement. But I can imagine that this stage is very scary for someone who's going through it, not just for the person who's going through it, but for the family member who's watching this loved one kind of go through it. And the church says that we should not seek to hasten death, but we just want to care for this person. So how do we continue to care for that someone that doesn't necessarily hasten death, but also doesn't impede on the quality of life?
This does come up, and I kind of feel like there's two different fears that patients may have as they approach end of life. I think that there's the actual dying itself, and then there's all the time that leads up to that, which people are afraid of suffering. And I think that in my experience, that's where sometimes the euthanasia has bubbled up, that nobody wants to suffer. And they want to feel like they have an option to ease their suffering. And I have found that with a strong palliative and hospice team in place, we have the resources to minimize that suffering. And I feel like once we're able to get a patient more comfortable, we in turn get their entire family more comfortable. And I think that then everybody feels more comfortable just allowing death to happen when it's supposed to happen, as opposed to trying to accelerate it and take matters kind of into their own hands by trying to do something like that. But I have had patients ask me about it, and I have not personally had anybody need to use that as an option because we've been able to manage their symptoms ourselves.
That's such an important point that you bring up, that it's more the fear of dying or the fear of suffering, because we've kind of had this ingrained in us that like, oh, you're going to be miserable. Like the end of your life is so miserable because you're going to be in pain, or we anticipate that. And I think I heard Father Mike Schmidt say that he defined anxiety as being like the fear of the future and then the fear of not being able to control the future. And that makes a lot of sense when you put it into death, because we don't know what death is. We don't know as Catholics, we know what's waiting on the other side, but we're still human beings, so we're still like, well, I've never seen heaven before. I don't know what it looks like.
You're exactly right. I've had patients say, I don't know. I never died before.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
well
I didn't either. I didn't either, but you're right. But there is so much fear of the unknown that I think that that's where, when we're holistically taking care of that patient, we're trying to meet their physical needs, their emotional needs, and their spiritual needs to just ease that whole burden of suffering there in that last season of life.
That's powerful. And it makes so much
makes so much sense, because if you're taking care of the whole person, it's really just going to minimize all of that.
All of it. Absolutely.
This is getting kind of morbid, and I don't mean for it to be morbid, but, everyone we know and love is going to die someday, including ourselves. But the thought of losing someone close to us makes it all the more frightening, especially if we're watching them suffer. And, you and I are both mothers. So that thought of losing somebody close to me, like thinking about my children, especially, or my husband, it's absolutely terrifying. And it's more like a feeling of powerlessness because there's nothing we can do. In your experience, how can we as loved ones prepare ourselves not just for the death of others, but eventually for our own death?
Mm-hmm. Death really is like a scary topic. And when I first started this job, it felt heavy to be surrounded by people who were constantly struggling with dying, on a daily basis. And I think historically, we kind of think, well, we're too young to die, right? We've got little kids. We can't possibly die yet. But that's so not the case.
Right.
I mean, we're taking care of people all the time that are parents of young ones and people younger than ourselves. And so it can be really heavy. But there are some very almost normal and predictable pieces at the end of life. Not always, but some of that can almost be predictable. And I think one of the things that we do a really great job of in helping people prepare for that has to do with a lot of the education of letting them know this is normal, this is to come, this is what you can expect. And when this happens, that's because this is where we are on the journey. And I think that helping people know that what they're experiencing is normal and what is coming is also normal, but we have a plan for that. Do you know what I mean? Like your pain may increase a little bit, but we have a plan for that. Or your shortness of breath may get a little worse as your, COPD worsens, but we have a plan for that. And I think that really helps take some of the anxiety and fear out of what is coming, because that knowledge, like you said, that knowledge is power. So we're not catching people off guard. When I first started this job, I was saying the death can be it was so heavy. And I kept looking at my family at the end of the day, like, I can't imagine leaving them or losing one of them. And I swear this is true. I started organizing things in my house better. I thought, if anything happens to me, I need everyone to know where to find the snow boots and the holiday decorations and all this stuff. And I almost started like mentally preparing just in case, because we just never know. But I think one of the things that is so helpful in just preparing for death, whether it is tomorrow or in 10 years or in 50 years, is it's never too early to start talking about it and almost planning for it. I feel like the patients who have taken the time, even while they're still well, to just talk to family about their wishes, get some documents in order with a living will or powers of attorney. And I mean, I've even had patients have their funeral planned far before they are diagnosed with anything terminal. And I've also had the opposite true, where just last week a patient's son said, gosh, we did not talk about this with my mom soon enough. And now mom can't talk to us about what she wants. And I think that the sooner we have conversations about what we want and with our loved ones, with what they want, takes a lot of the burden off of our loved ones down the road. Because my mom used to say, don't make decisions when you're emotional. It's much harder to make decisions for a loved one when they're uncomfortable or in the hospital or suffering than it would have been 5 years prior when they weren't so ill. And I think that is one of the gifts that we can give our loved ones, is to start having conversations before we need to and get things in place much before we need to. It takes some of the pressure off of everyone.
Absolutely. It's when my husband deployed, we had that conversation of like, okay, but like that was something that like we knew he was going into a war zone, like, and thank God he was okay, but he had a will drawn up, we had power of attorney. And then I think about me, like yourself, I'm like, oh man, if I were to get into an accident on 81 or 83, like, does my husband know our kid's dentist? Do we have the phone numbers for the school? Why does my house look like Jumanji when you walk in the front? Like, it's like you said, just that little bit of extra preparation. I think I read somewhere, it might have been the Netherlands, they actually have a practice where they prepare for their death, where they basically like do like a purge of their home, where they're like getting ready so like people aren't like sifting through everything when they're trying to look for important documents or whatnot. Or like my mom, like I always knew I gotta love this woman. She's such a planner, but she has like drawers in her house, like labeled. And at first I thought I was like, oh, it's probably OCD. And I'm like, no, she's actually telling me where to look for important documents.
That's amazing.
Or like, here's where everything is. And she's got like a safe with like files of stuff. And I'm like, it makes sense. And being able to adapt that for something. So like I have a document going right now with like, you know, here's all where the kids go to school and their sizes that they're currently in. And so in case I were to drop dead tomorrow, my husband isn't like, what size shoes do they wear? Something like, and then this isn't to say that like husbands aren't capable, because like my husband has files for the Army. So like I know where to go to access all his VA information or things like that. And it's being a responsible adult. But like you said, it's something we're so busy living that we forget that eventually we're going to die.
Yeah.
It feels like it's never going to happen.
You're right. Sometimes we feel we know we're not immortal, but we feel like too busy to be mortal.
Yes. Well, I can't be sick right now. I got stuff to do.
Right. Yeah. And I found truly, I tell patients, talking about death does not make it happen any faster. It doesn't. But it just gets the conversations going, it gets the planning going, it gets the dialogue flowing, and it just makes everything run smoother for everyone down the road. Yep.
That's so true. Now I got to go home and like finish organizing everything. So talk to me a little bit about, you know, you spent a large part of your career, like you said, surrounded by death. How has working with the dying affected your faith? I mean, does it inform your decisions in care? Does it, you know, bleed over into other aspects of your life? I know we talked about, you know, being prepared, but how else has it affected you?
I think there were two major milestones in my life that affected my faith in a significant way. And one was when I became a mom. I understood love in a completely new way. And I understood the relationship of like a parent and child in a whole new way. And that was absolutely transformative in my faith. And I think that having a job where on a daily basis I am faced with death, and not in a morbid way, but thinking about my own death on a daily basis, has almost given me a sense of hope, because I have seen, it's not always true, but usually true, that patients with faith are less afraid to die. They believe that there is something better after this life. And as Catholics, we believe that there's something much better than this. And I remember being in a patient's home, and they were speaking about their own death with such joy and almost excitement. And the patient looked at me and said, "Can you imagine what it's going to be like to be welcomed into the arms of Jesus? And can you imagine just feeling peace and comfort forever? And I get to see all the people that passed away before me." And I feel like people of faith sometimes, I don't want to say look forward to it, but there's less anxiety because their belief is stronger than their fear when it comes to death. So I've really tried to mirror that in my own faith. And although I'm not ready to die anytime soon, I try to keep my belief and my faith stronger than my fear.
That is powerful. It's something that I hadn't really, that's a really great reframe of just being so confident in our faith and continuing to not necessarily, like you said, like be excited or just, we're not as fearful.
Not as fearful.
To not be as fearful of death because there's something greater waiting for us.
And seeing how God has worked in my life and in my job, like I have no reason to doubt that he's going to walk me through to the end. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And that really gives me a whole lot of hope.
Ugh, I love that. Kind of continuing down this path, what are some things that you've learned about death or dying from those who are currently walking that path?
Well, as we said, inevitably it's going to come sooner or later. But I've learned that patients at the end of life never wish they worked more. They're not looking for extra money at the end of life. What everyone wants is more time, and usually more quality time. I feel like being surrounded by people at the end of life all the time reminds me all the time to just like be a good person, be kind, help others, look for the good. Don't waste your time being burdened with regrets and comparison and getting sucked down rabbit holes where we don't really belong. But in the grand scheme of things, life is short. And my patients tell me that all the time. So we have the choice of how we want to spend the time we have, and really trying to use it wisely, I think, is such a gift. I think working in palliative care is a daily reminder to just be grateful always, truly.
And I guess lastly, what's one thing you wish more people knew about palliative care?
I think helping to explain what it is and the value that it brings is probably the most important part of palliative care. Understanding that we want to take care of the whole person, understanding that you don't have to give anything up or stop anything to have palliative care be involved. I want people to talk about death more often. I want them to have those difficult conversations. I want them to understand that palliative is different than hospice and not be afraid of either of them. And I think just with palliative care, we cannot affect the outcome, but it's our job and our privilege to kind of affect the journey.
Well, Christina, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this. I know that it's a tough topic, but it's one that we absolutely need to be having more often, especially with our parents, with our loved ones, with family, just to put our minds at ease.
Just the more we talk about it, I think the less scary it becomes.
I love that. The more we talk about it, the less scary it becomes. Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much for listening. Our goal at the Diocese of Harrisburg is to walk with you on your faith journey. So if this episode resonated with you in any way, the easiest way to show your appreciation is by sharing this program with your network or by leaving a review on your listening platform. You can also support us financially by making a donation online at hbgdiocese.org/DAC and clicking the Make a Donation button. Thanks again, and we'll see you at church on Sunday.